I know there are people who were born to be invisible people, who learn to ask for permission even when all they want is simply to exist. Maybe I'm one of them. My name is Andrea. I'm 68 years old, and for the first time in my life, I'm starting to understand what it means to be seen by myself. This story began with a folded piece of paper, hurried handwriting, and a single line that felt like a slap in the face. Mom, this place will be better for you. Just for a few days. Better for you. She said it with an awkward smile, her eyes glued to her phone as if every second the screen went dark was a wasted moment. Rachel, my only daughter, was the reason I spent decades waking up before dawn, driving more than 40 minutes to clean office buildings, saving every penny, skipping new clothes so she could afford college. That Monday morning in Seattle was gray and heavy, as if the sky itself was warning me that something was about to change. Rachel was driving, her voice unusually soft, too sweet, the kind of tone people use when they're trying to sell you on an idea. Mom, today I want to take you somewhere special. You'll love it. It's quiet, comfortable, and there are people your age there, just for a few days. I promise, it'll be good for you. That line took me back to years ago when Rachel's father promised he'd be back later that afternoon while I was 3 months pregnant. He said he was just going out to grab a few things. 2 years later, he came back, not with gifts, but with the news that he'd moved on with someone else. But with Rachel, I believed things would be different. I had been everything for her mother, father, her support, her anchor. When she got divorced at 37, I was the one who packed the suitcases, brought pots and pans, and carried courage with me to her side. She moved in to help for a while. I signed for a credit loan in my name to help her pay off her post-divorce debt. I lived in the small room next to the garage, and I kept telling myself, just temporary. But temporary has a way of becoming forever when you love too much. The special place Rachel mentioned was a nursing home on the outskirts of Bellevue, cream-colored walls, a few plastic flower pots at the entrance, and a slow-moving automatic gate that seemed to understand no one ever walked through it by choice. She handed me a small suitcase. Your things are in here. Just the essentials. I'll come back on Sunday, okay? David and I are going to Palm Springs with his mom. We've been planning this trip for months. Palm Springs, a place I'd only seen on TV. My daughter went with her soon-to-be mother-in-law, and I was gifted a small room with a wooden bed, a flat pillow, and the faded scent of lavender. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just walked in quietly. The receptionist was polite, called me Mrs. Andrea, and offered me tea. I accepted, like someone accepting a sentence. I sat on the bed, looked out the window, just a gray concrete wall. I whispered to myself, just a few days. But something inside me broke. Not sadness, shame. A kind of shame that wasn't mine, yet felt like it was draped over my shoulders. That night, I couldn't sleep. The ticking clock, mixed with the soft snoring of the elderly woman next door. I remembered when Rachel was little, burning with fever for 3 nights straight, and I prayed beside her until sunrise. I remembered patching her slacks for her first job interview because she couldn't afford a new pair. I remembered the nights she cried over heartbreak, and I was the one to tell her, "You deserve better." And now, it was me crying silently, with no one to say a word. The next morning, I put on my nicest blouse, the one that still smelled faintly of my old apartment. I asked to use the receptionist's computer. The young woman smiled and nodded. I logged into my bank account, hands trembling, and began canceling one by one. The main account, the secondary cards, the shared account. All of it was under my name. All of it built on my shoulders. Not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. I left a note for the nurse on duty. "Thank you for everything. You're very kind, but this place isn't for me. Sincerely, Andrea." I wheeled my suitcase out the door and called Martha, my childhood friend from Spokane. Martha, I need a favor. Just for tonight. 3 hours later, I was holding a bus ticket in my hand. Destination: Palm Springs. Not to find my daughter, but to find myself again. Because dignity never retires. And a mother's heart always knows when it's time to leave. I boarded the bus, flat shoes, fresh lipstick, and a lighter soul. If life has taught me anything, it's this: disrespect doesn't always scream. Sometimes it wears the face of silence, unfinished sentences, or a quiet request like, "Mom, could you stay in your room a little longer? I don't want you to get in the way." From that moment, everything started to change. Rachel used to be a strong, smart, decisive young woman. She probably got that from me. But over time, that brightness turned into hurry. Closeness turned into distance. After her divorce, her house felt empty. I could see in her eyes a kind of exhaustion that wasn't of the body, but of the soul. So, I went. I left the apartment I had saved for all my life, rented it out, and moved in with her. I told myself, just temporary, until she could get back on her feet. I brought 2 suitcases as if I wasn't just moving homes, but also changing roles. From mother to caretaker. From independent woman to someone standing on the sidelines. At first, everything was warm. We had lunch together, laughed at silly things on TV. I made soup on cold days, left sticky notes on the mirror. Everything will pass. You're stronger than you think. Mom loves you. She never replied, and I told myself, she's probably hurting from the marriage. She stayed out late, hit her phone, smiled to herself while texting. And then I heard the name David, a businessman in real estate. He came over, but I was reminded to not come out of my room much. "Mom, David's stopping by for a bit today, okay? Just stay in your room for today. We'll talk later." Always. Later. And I started to realize every time he appeared, I disappeared. Not because I was jealous. God knows. I'm not like that. But because, every time he came, my daughter let me vanish, and it didn't seem to bother her. Disappearing became my place. One day, I accidentally overheard their conversation. I was in the kitchen, rinsing a coffee cup while they were in her bedroom. The door wasn't fully closed. Rachel answered in a tone I'll never forget. "Just temporary. She helps me a lot, but you know, she's too simple. Doesn't fit into my new life." That sentence hit my chest like a rock. Too simple. As if simplicity were a flaw. As if riding the bus my whole life, re-wearing clothes, buying secondhand to save money, somehow made me less valuable. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I sat on the bed staring at the ceiling. I felt like an antique, still useful, but already considered outdated. Then came the trips. Vacations without my name on the list. Invitations that never had space for one more. And then came the Palm Springs trip. I heard Rachel talking on the phone with David's mother. "It's going to be amazing. Just our family. A private trip, no one else intruding." Intruding. I had become the intrusion. The next week, she came with the idea of a special place. She said I'd get to rest. Just a few days. A nice, clean place with people my age. I agreed because mothers like me have that foolish tendency to believe until proven otherwise. But deep down, I already knew. I was being taken there not to rest but to disappear. On the way, Rachel played an upbeat playlist, humming softly like she was heading to a party. And I, sitting in the passenger seat, held a small suitcase with only 2 changes of clothes and a pair of sandals. "You're going to love it, Mom," David's mother said. "It's wonderful. You need time for yourself too, right?" David's mother. She was the one worthy of going along. When the gate of the nursing home opened, I shivered. It looked nice from the outside, but there was something cold about it, a silence that felt heavy. She handed me a folded piece of paper, kissed my forehead lightly, and said, "I love you, Mom." And right there, in the middle of that flowered courtyard, I understood. It wasn't about being tired, it was about being ashamed. I sat in the back seat of the bus, heading to Palm Springs. I looked out the window and took a deep breath. The young woman next to me asked, "First time in this city?" I smiled. Yes, the first time I'm traveling for myself. Because on that bus, I was no longer the mother locked in a small room. I was Andrea. Simple maybe, but invisible, never again. I stepped off the bus as if I had shed an old, hard shell. The wind carried the scent of salt from the sea. The traffic moved slowly, as if the whole city had learned how not to rush. Palm Springs wasn't waiting for me, but it welcomed me with quiet kindness. I bought a small cup of coffee at a roadside cafe, sat down at a plastic table, placed my suitcase next to me, and watched people pass by. Families laughing, young people taking photos, elegant women in bright clothes with designer handbags. For a moment, I wondered if I was doing something crazy 68 years old, having just blocked the shared bank accounts, my heart still sore. But then a child ran by and smiled at me, a clear, non-judgmental smile. And I smiled back. Maybe that was all I needed to be seen without being judged. I caught a regular taxi and asked the driver to take me to the beach. I had no hotel reservation, only one wish: to see the ocean. And when the ocean appeared, oh, it was beautiful. The water reflected the sky like a liquid mirror, and the sun seemed painted just for me that day. I stopped at a small inn. The receptionist was a young woman named Bianca, her voice gentle and polite. Seeing me, she offered a room with a balcony and breakfast included. "Are you planning to stay long?" she asked. I smiled. "I don't know. Maybe just long enough to remember who I am." The room was small, clean, and quiet. A soft bed, a rocking chair on the balcony, and a pitcher of water on a wooden table. I slipped off my shoes, feeling the cool floor under my feet. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like an extra person. I turned on the TV, then turned it off again. The sound bothered me. I was used to silence, but this time, it belonged to me, not imposed by anyone. I took a small mirror from my bag and looked at myself, not judging like before, not trying to hide my gray hair or wrinkles. I looked at myself with gentleness. I saw beauty, not magazine beauty, but the kind that comes from still standing after everything. The next morning, I put on a thin cotton dress, one of the few I had brought, and walked along the sand. My feet sank slowly, the waves brushing my ankles as if to say, "You belong here." I stopped at a coconut water stand. The old man with silver beard and kind smile asked, "Are you traveling alone?" "I'm traveling with myself," I replied. He chuckled. "The best companion there is." And for the first time, I agreed without lying. After that, I sat on a long bench by the shore, watching groups of people go by. And I realized something. It wasn't the city that was the problem. It wasn't other people. It was me who had allowed them to treat me that way. All these years, always shrinking, always waiting for someone to say, "You're good enough." I had always been good enough. That afternoon, I received a text from Rachel. "Mom, I can't reach you. The bank accounts are locked. My card isn't working. Please answer. I'm desperate." I didn't reply. I deleted the notification. If my daughter wanted to know where I was, she'd have to ask with sincerity, not convenience. That evening, I had dinner alone in a small restaurant with checkered tablecloths and soft piano music playing in the background. The waiter treated me with slow, deliberate respect, no rush, no impatience, as if I were an important guest. I ordered something I had never dared to order before: shrimp risotto. When the dish arrived, I took a picture not to post online, but to remind myself that I, too, deserved beautiful things. I walked back to the inn, my hair loose, my heart lighter. From the balcony, before bed, I looked up at the sky and thought about an entire life spent hiding behind the word mother, as if I wasn't allowed to be anything more than that, as if my worth existed only when I was serving someone else. But now, it was just me. That night, I slept better than I had in years alone, in peace, without the fear of being a burden. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating on the nightstand. 3 missed calls, 4 new messages, all from the same person: Rachel. The sun hadn't fully risen yet. Light filtered slowly through the curtains, as if asking for permission. I sat on the edge of the bed, took a deep breath, and looked at the screen. Mom, please answer me. You disappeared. I'm desperate. They declined my card at the restaurant. I'm humiliated. Where are you? Call me right now. Desperate. Humiliated. How ironic, the same daughter who made me disappear like a stain hidden under a tablecloth, who locked me away in silence while smiling at her new life, who told me I was too simple for her new world. Now, she was humiliated. I stood up calmly, picked up my comb, and walked into the bathroom. I looked at myself again this time, without fear of the marks of time. Every wrinkle had a name: a fatigue, a sleepless night for someone who wasn't me. I recognized every crease in the story of my life, and for the first time, the reflection in the mirror didn't hurt anymore. I went back to the room, sat on the chair outside the balcony, and stayed there for a while. The ocean in the distance was still whispering. In that moment, memories returned like waves crashing ashore. I remembered Rachel as a child, her hair damp with sweat from playing, the time she fell off her bike and called for me before she even hit the ground, the nights she burned with fever and slept in my arms until sunrise. Every birthday I decorated myself with tape and balloons, lighting candles on a crooked cake. The school presentations where she proudly said, "My mom helped me." Yes, I helped her become everything she is today. Every part of her life was built on the bricks I carried. But I also remembered the quiet moments, the day she got into college and said coldly, "You don't need to come, Mom. I'm going with my friend Marina's dad." The day she remodeled her house but said it wasn't time yet to fix my room. Or the birthday of my own, when she arrived late. But acceptance isn't forgetting, it's just putting it away, sometimes for too long. I looked at my phone, about to respond, when another message came in. "Are you punishing me? What did I do wrong?" I closed my eyes, swallowed the tears. This was the worst part, when someone makes you doubt your own pain, when they wrap guilt around your shoulders like a blanket too heavy to lift. I stood up, took a long shower, put on a light-colored dress, and walked to the beach. I needed air. Along the way, I saw an elderly woman sitting on a bench, eyes closed, smiling softly. She must have been around 80, wearing a colorful scarf and leather sandals. I slowed down as I approached. She opened her eyes. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," I smiled back. "Are you from here?" "No, just passing through." She nodded, then said something that went straight through me. "Sometimes you have to leave the places where people treat you like furniture. Only then do you remember you still have a voice." Her words caught in my throat, as if she knew everything without knowing anything. We talked for a few minutes. Her name was Odette, a widow who had lived alone for years. She said her best companion in life had been silence. We parted with a handshake, a silent exchange that said, "I see you." I walked back to the small inn in Santa Monica, carrying a new kind of strength inside me. Not anger, clarity. I went upstairs, sat on the bed, and reread all of my daughter's messages. Some apologizing, others demanding a response. One of them said, "How could you do this to me?" "Ah, my dear daughter, I could, when I slept on a factory couch so you'd have milk. I could, when I registered your birth alone, because no one else would come. I could, when I accepted living in the storage room while you rebuilt your life, watching you look at me like I should disappear whenever guests arrived. What I'm doing now isn't cruelty, it's survival. Mom didn't disappear to do something bad. Mom started to truly exist." I took a notebook from the drawer, in my room at the inn, opened the first page and wrote, "List of things I still want to do. Sit on the beach until sunset without looking at the clock. Eat a dish I've never dared to eat before. Stop apologizing for being myself." I closed the notebook, took a deep breath, and smiled. The phone vibrated again. This time, I turned it off. Because now, the one who needs an answer is not me. We spend too much time trying to be accepted, forgetting to ask whether the place that rejected us even deserves our presence. That thought woke me up that morning, before sunrise. The sky over Santa Monica that morning seemed silent with me. No wind, no noise, just pale blue light filtering through the curtains, reminding me a new day had begun. And unlike every other day, this one belonged to me. I stood up, slowly. My legs were still heavy from the days before, not because of age, but because of another kind of fatigue, the weight of being forgotten while still alive. I opened the balcony door. The street below began to move, people going to work, people strolling, people searching for meaning. And I, for the first time, didn't have to be someone for anybody. I sat down in the familiar chair, as I had every morning since I arrived. But today was different. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for a notification. I wasn't tied to hope for an apologetic message. In truth, I expected nothing from anyone anymore, and in that, I found freedom. I went downstairs for breakfast at the inn, thanked the receptionist, and stepped out into the street without a plan. I walked through a few unfamiliar streets, stopped at a craft market, and chatted with an elderly woman selling stone bracelets. These weren't my stories, but somehow, they healed me. I bought a necklace not for the object itself, but for the feeling of giving myself something beautiful. In the afternoon, I returned to the beach. The sea was rougher today, white foam whispering something. I sat on a concrete bench, watching the waves. A small family passed by. 3 children, a tired mother, a father juggling things, and a grandmother, the one who caught my attention, hair neatly pinned, a patient smile. She helped, but wasn't overshadowed. She was present with dignity. That scene made me suddenly realize, unlike me, that woman wasn't endured. She was welcomed. Right in that moment, I decided I wouldn't go back, not to the house where my presence was a burden, not to the small back room they called temporary for so many years, not back to the words, "Love you, Mom," that only appeared when the bank account was in trouble. I wouldn't go back to be tolerated. I returned to my seaside inn in Santa Barbara, opened the closet, took out my only suitcase, and placed it on the bed. It was still nearly full. I'd never really unpacked, as if I still didn't believe I deserved to stay. But this time was different. I opened the suitcase, took everything out, folded the clothes into the drawer, placed my shoes in the corner, set my toothbrush in a cup in the bathroom. For the first time since being left at the nursing home, I unpacked with the intention of truly staying. The room was simple, but it felt warm. Some begging, some blaming. One said, "If you don't come back before Sunday, I'll know you don't want to be part of my life anymore. I read carefully, then replied calmly, with the steadiness that only comes when you truly know yourself. Rachel, I've never stopped being part of your life, but now I choose to return to being part of my own life. I hit send, turned off the phone, and placed it in the drawer. Tears fell not from sadness, but from relief. Relief at no longer having to ask for space, no longer having to pretend. That evening, I went to eat at a small spot on State Street, the one I walked past every day. The restaurant was simple, warm yellow lights, the smell of fresh baked bread in the air. I sat alone as always, but this time I didn't feel lonely. I smiled. No, today I'm not waiting for anyone. When I finished, I walked back looking at the city as if it were thanking me. Because even though I didn't have everything, I already had the most important thing. Before bed, I wrote a letter not to my daughter, but to myself. Dear Andrea, all your life you have loved with everything you had. Now, it's time to learn how to love yourself. You were not born to stand forever backstage in your own story. You have a voice, you have value, and you have the right to choose peace. Don't go back. Don't shrink yourself. Don't apologize. Signed, The Woman You Are Becoming. I folded the letter, placed it inside my notebook, and went to sleep. That night, for the first time, I dreamed of myself dancing alone on the beach in Santa Barbara. People often think freedom is something grand with fireworks and an audience, but it's not. True freedom is sometimes just being able to choose where to have breakfast without asking permission. It's being able to take a walk without fearing you'll bother someone. It's being able to walk into a store without having to explain why you're there. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of sparrows singing outside the balcony, a small gray one with a sharp beak, chirping endlessly as if urging me to return to life. I sat watching it for a few minutes. It felt like it was calling me to keep living. I put on a light-colored dress, tied my hair neatly, then went downstairs to the front desk. Becca, the young receptionist, smiled like she did every day. Did you sleep well, Mrs. Andrea? Better than I have in many years, I replied sincerely. I stepped outside for a walk. No rush, no emptiness, only presence. I stopped by a small newsstand, bought a hardcover notebook, and a blue pen. I wanted to write down the thoughts that had stayed with me since the day I arrived here. I sat on a stone bench facing the Pacific Ocean, opened the new notebook, and wrote on the first page, Things I want to keep. Then I listed morning walks without a phone, drinking coffee alone, slowly, stopping the habit of over-explaining, allowing myself to laugh peacefully, not accepting fragments of emotions, keeping distance from what makes me small, and writing again. Yes, writing again. Because once, before motherhood, before the struggles, the bills, and the whirlpool of life I wrote letters, poems, little stories always in secret. Now, that spark flickered again in my heart. When I got back to the inn, I asked Becca if the city had any community libraries. She said yes, a small, cozy one run by volunteers, near downtown. I asked for the address, changed clothes, and went right away. The library was small, with wooden walls and the comforting scent of old books. The young woman in charge, named Emily, greeted me with a gentle smile. Sit wherever you like. Everyone's welcome here. I picked up a random book, didn't even check the title. I just wanted to hear the soft rustle of pages, to enjoy the quiet, and to feel what it's like to be in a place where no one looks at you with pity or haste. After almost an hour, I walked up to Emily and asked, Do you need any help around here? She looked surprised, then smiled. Always. We need people to organize books, read stories to seniors, and write thank you letters to donors. Do you write? I smiled. Yes, and I think it's time to start again. She handed me a small notebook with instructions, simple, gentle tasks. A few lines of gratitude, a few kind wishes. It was exactly the kind of care I'd always known how to give. I left with a new purpose, and that made my heart feel light. On the way back, I passed by a small hair salon with an old sign that read, "Haircut, $30." I stepped inside on instinct. The stylist, named Maggie, greeted me with a smile wider than the whole shop. "So, what are we doing today?" "A cut? I just want to trim away what feels heavy and old." She understood right away. Maggie's hands were gentle, her words few. When she finished, she turned the mirror toward me. "Look, a new woman." I looked and nodded, not because of the haircut, but because for the first time, my outside and my inside were in harmony. I went back to the little inn in Santa Barbara with a lighter heart and a lighter head in both the literal and the figurative sense. I had a simple dinner, then sat out on the balcony, opened my notebook, and wrote another page. Today, I did something useful, not because anyone told me to, but because I wanted to. Today, I existed on my own terms and was respected in the quiet. That night, I didn't turn on my phone, not even out of curiosity. It had been off for 2 days, and that feeling was pure peace. The outside world could be chaotic, but inside me, for the first time, there was space. Space for me, for a new rhythm, for a new way of living. Falling asleep with that feeling, it was the most luxurious thing in my life. It had been almost a week since I last touched my phone. It lay still in the drawer, like a piece of the past I no longer needed. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of waves stronger than usual. The city was alive. People laughing, walking, enjoying. And I, in the middle of it all, owed nothing to anyone as I went down for breakfast. There were a few people already in the dining room. I smiled. "Hello," then sat near the window. I ordered buttered toast, black coffee, and a plate of fruit. Simple, but it was mine. Chosen by me, savored by me. After breakfast, I went back to the library. The morning passed in small joys. Arranging books, labeling, replying to little thank you notes from anonymous readers. Each line I wrote stitched up the tears inside me, each stitch. I was mending myself. As closing time neared, Emily, the young librarian, came over. "Mrs. Andrea, may I ask, someone's been calling to see if you come here often." My heart fluttered for just a second. "It's your daughter, Rachel," she said softly, like handing over a secret. "Do you want me to tell her anything?" I took a deep breath. "Just tell her I'm fine. And that now, I only see people who know how to respect me." She smiled. "All right, I'll let her know." I left the library, my steps firmer. I understood silence is also a voice, and sometimes it's louder than a scream. Until then, my daughter probably thought this was just a whim, a moment of impulse. But when silence stretches, it forces others to hear themselves. And maybe, for the first time, Rachel was hearing her own heart. A flood of notifications filled the screen: messages, missed calls, even a few from David. I opened the last voicemail from my daughter, just out of curiosity. Her voice was trembling. "Mom, I'm so worried. You disappeared. The bank said you closed all the accounts. I don't know where to start. Please call me. I know I was wrong, but please don't leave me in the dark like this. Where are you? Are you alive? Do you hate me?" I turned the message off. No, it wasn't hate. It had never been hate, but it wasn't love either. What she gave me was only convenience, a presence when needed, a bit of conditional concern. And that, too, can wear a heart down. I could answer with a single short sentence. I'm fine. But I knew this time. Silence was the most complete answer. Why should I be the one to soothe the person who hurt me, then go on living as if I were something disposable? That night, instead of replying, I went to the beach. It was Friday. The path along the shore was crowded, but I found a quiet spot on the sand. I slipped off my sandals, letting my bare feet sink into the wet sand. The ocean surged and receded like life, like love, like people. I suddenly wanted to dance not with my body, but with my soul. That lightness only comes when you truly realize you don't have to prove anything anymore. Right then, a woman sat down beside me. It was Mrs. Odette, the woman I'd spoken with a few days before. I knew I'd see you here, she said in a warm, low voice. She smiled. Then you've understood. What do you mean? I asked. That sometimes we need to disappear to find ourselves. And once we do, we can't go back, at least not to the same place or the same role. We sat in silence for a long moment, the kind of silence that feels gentle, full of understanding. Before standing up, she lightly touched my shoulder and said, "When someone asks about you in desperation, it means they realize they've lost something. But not everyone who loses you deserves to find you again." I returned to the inn, her words still echoing in my mind. I opened my notebook and wrote another page. She's looking for me, but not because she misses me. She misses the things I used to do for her, the burdens I carried, the silence I kept. But now, I am only Andrea, and this version, my daughter, is no longer for sale. I closed the notebook, turned off my phone, and fell asleep to the sound of waves outside. It was no longer pain, it was goodbye. Goodbye to the old life, to the woman who forgot her own worth. The next morning, the phone at the front desk rang. Claire, the soft-spoken receptionist, walked over to my breakfast table and said quietly, "Mrs. Andrea, there's a call from the bank. They asked to let you know once the paperwork was finalized." I nodded, thanked her, and stepped out to take the call. "Good morning, this is Andrea." The voice on the other end was formal. "Mrs. Andrea, everything is complete. The documents have been signed electronically and are being processed. Would you like to proceed with canceling all the cards and moving forward with the property sale?" I closed my eyes for a second, took a deep breath. "Yes, proceed. And please, make it quick." The man confirmed and hung up. The call lasted less than 2 minutes, but it changed years of my life. Because in that moment, I severed the last strings, tying me to a false story. The house where I used to live with my daughter, the one with the tiny back room meant for me, where I was told to stay quiet when her boyfriend visited, where my presence was merely tolerated, never welcomed, that house was mine. It was under my name. My money had helped Rachel renovate it after her divorce, and my signature allowed her to get a line of credit. I had given everything, believing that love was measured by sacrifice. But it wasn't. Love isn't a debt to be repaid. It's something given and received. And what I received in return were only crumbs. So I decided to sell it, because a house where you have to bow your head to walk down the hallway isn't a home, it's a storage space. And I wasn't born to be stored away in the dark. I went back to my room and reviewed the documents. There was no regret, only a quiet strength I had never known before. This wasn't revenge. It was justice for myself, dignity signed back into my own name. That afternoon, I went to a small real estate office in downtown Santa Barbara. The air smelled of fresh paint, the AC was too cold, and the staff smiled brightly. I explained everything clearly, showed them the papers, and said firmly, "I want this to be private and quick. I don't want my daughter to know ahead of time. This is my decision." The agent looked at me half respectful, half astonished, as if watching someone who had just woken up from a very long sleep. We signed the contract. He promised to notify me as soon as there was a buyer. Sitting on the stiff leather chair, I realized I was buying back something greater than that house. My freedom. I stepped out, stopped by a stationery shop nearby, and bought a few envelopes, writing paper, and a new folder. I wanted to keep every document, every copy, because the woman who used to save only receipts had finally learned to keep her own choices. That evening, I sat on the balcony with a cup of tea, listening to the ocean whisper. I thought about my whole life, how people always say a mother must forgive, a mother always returns, a mother never hesitates. But no one ever says that a mother can get tired too, that she has limits, that she has the right to walk away, not out of hate, but out of awakening, out of self-love, out of knowing that if she stays, she will vanish completely. The next morning, the phone rang. It was Rachel. I didn't answer. It rang again, this time from a different number. I picked up. "Mom, it's me. Please don't hang up." I stayed silent. "The bank said the house has been listed for sale. Mom, are you really doing this?" I spoke slowly. "Yes, but that's my house." "No, Rachel. It has always been my house. You were just living in it, and you forgot that when you started treating me like a guest." The other end went quiet. "Mom, I don't understand why you're doing this. Why now?" Could never do. She tried to justify herself, saying she didn't know. Didn't mean it. Everything happened so fast. I listened, but I didn't change. "Rachel, I still love you. But the love that made me disappear so you could shine, that love is no longer mine." I hung up. Not with anger, not with noise, only with certainty. I closed my eyes, let the phone slide from my hand, fall softly onto the bed, and in that moment, I knew Andrea had finally returned to herself. I looked up at the ceiling and felt relief, not because I had won, but because I had finally stopped losing myself. At the end of the day, I went back to the community library in Santa Barbara, helped label books, sipped coffee with homemade cookies, and received a warm hug from Emily, the young librarian. "You seem different today," she said. "Less baggage, but more Andrea." That night, I didn't write in my notebook. I did something better. I sat quietly with myself and listened, and what I heard was beautiful. My heartbeat had returned to its own rhythm. Late the next afternoon, as I sat on the inn's balcony sipping chamomile tea and watching the sunset cast gold over the distant buildings, she appeared. Rachel. She stood across the street, looking at me, then stopped. Her hair was neatly pinned, her eyes swollen. The expensive dress she must have worn to dinner with David, now making her look small, lost inside the role she no longer fit. Our eyes met. I didn't smile, didn't look away, just waited. She crossed the street and stopped in front of the balcony. "Mom, can I come up?" I nodded slightly. A few minutes later, she stepped in, her eyes scanning every corner of the inn, as if the place was whispering things she had never wanted to hear. She sat next to me, saying nothing. Silence settled. Then she spoke. "I didn't come to fight. I just want to understand why you didn't answer. Why you disappeared like that." I looked, straight at the sea, glinting between the buildings before answering. "Because I was tired of shouting at someone who never listened." She bowed her head, her voice trembling. "I know I was wrong. I wasn't fair, but Mom, you can't just disappear like that. I need you." I turned to look at my daughter. "You've always needed me, but did you ever ask if I could, if I wanted to, or if I was okay?" She stayed silent. I continued. "I became a supporting character in your life, Rachel. I was only useful when you needed money, companionship, someone to fill the empty spaces. But when you built a new life, I became a burden." She started to cry, not loud sobs, but the tears of shame, of realization. I miss you, truly. I miss you too, I said. But missing doesn't mean appreciating. What you miss isn't your mother, but the person who served you. She wanted to argue, but no words came. When you left me in the nursing home with a folded note saying, "Mom, here is better for you," you weren't thinking of me. You were thinking of your image, your convenience, and what others would think. I was too simple for your new world. She shook her head, tears falling, as if she could erase what had been said. That's not true. You know that. Then tell me, why didn't you take me with you on that trip? Why did you hide it from me? She stayed silent. Only the sound of her quiet sobs remained. And I understood. She hadn't come to reconcile, but to ask for easy forgiveness, to soften a guilt she hadn't yet learned to carry. But I was no longer here to soothe anyone. Rachel, I still love you. That will never change. But I won't live with you anymore. I am no longer the backdrop for your decisions, and I will not fold myself into small corners just to avoid bothering anyone. She tried to hold my hand. I gently pulled away. I am at peace, for the first time in a very long time. And I will not trade this peace to squeeze myself back into your life. She nodded, sobbing. That house will be sold. The process has begun. You need to find another place to live. And this isn't punishment, it's the consequence of years of neglect and silence. She tried to catch her breath, swallowing her tears, and asked, "What do you want from me now?" I looked straight at her. Nothing at all. If one day you want to visit, I will welcome you. But come as a daughter, not as someone in debt, not as someone begging, but as someone who has learned to see. She slowly stood up, looking at me for a long time. I don't know if I can change right away. Neither did I replied. It took me 67 years to change, but now I will not go back. She turned away, walking down the stairs without another word. I lifted my head toward the darkening sky and realized all my life I had only been waited for, ordered, demanded. And when you're truly listened to, even silence has a voice. That day was a golden Sunday in Santa Barbara, California. Brilliant light poured down the cobblestone streets by the ocean, like a blessing meant just for me. I had grown used to that light, but today, I felt as if it could see me too. The city was still lively, children running around, older people talking in the park, couples holding hands eating ice cream by the shore. And I, among it all, felt only peace with myself, with what had passed, and with what I chose to keep. The little inn where I stayed now felt like a home. The receptionist simply called me Andrea, without Mrs., a title tied to all the years I had been made invisible. The afternoon staff still brought tea and cookies to my room, and the coconut water vendor on the corner had learned my habit. No straw, thank you. Those small details for so many years, no one had noticed me, enough to see them. That morning, I returned to the community library. There was a public reading today. I sat in the back row, listening to a young student read old letters found in the archives. Letters from mothers to children far away, from children to fathers who had passed, from wives left behind after separation. Those words echoed like the whispers of every Andrea who had ever existed. Mothers forgotten, silenced, used, then left behind with only a polite smile. I went back to the inn with a sudden urge to write not a letter to anyone else, but a letter to myself. I sat on the balcony, opened my notebook, and slowly wrote on the first page. I didn't leave. I just came back to myself. And at that moment, I understood the difference. I wasn't running away. I wasn't abandoning anything. I had simply stopped abandoning myself, and that changed everything. In the days that followed, I began thinking about the next step. The inn was comfortable, but only temporary. I went to see a few small apartments to rent. I didn't need much, just a room with a window, a kitchen big enough for a tea kettle, and a corner of the living room where I could listen to music without headphones. Then I found a small, lovely studio with wooden floors, its view slanting toward the Pacific Ocean. The rent was reasonable. The agent asked if I wanted to negotiate. I smiled. No. I want to sign right away. This place chose me. While waiting for the paperwork to finish, I began buying small things. A new blanket, a vase of artificial flowers, the kind that never fade, an empty picture frame where maybe one day I would place a photo of myself smiling. 2 days later, the sale of the old house in Los Angeles was complete. The money went straight into my account. When I opened the banking app and saw the number, I didn't feel power, I felt relief. Because that money wasn't just money, it was a symbol, proof that I could start again without begging for a place. I sent Rachel a short, sincere message. The house sale is complete. The agent will contact you. I hope you find your own path. As for me, I've found mine. She replied that same day. I understand. Even though I don't agree with everything, I accept it. I hope one day you'll let me visit. I didn't answer. Because some things need to be kept quiet by time. If that day comes, let it come naturally. No forcing, no apologies, no rushing. On the first night in my new apartment, I played soft music, lit a cinnamon-scented candle, and cooked spaghetti with garlic and olive oil. Celebrated silence that was no longer heavy. Celebrated light that didn't blind. Celebrated freedom that didn't need an audience. After dinner, I stepped out onto the balcony. The breeze was gentle, the sky dark, stars peeking between the buildings. I closed my eyes, listening to the steady rhythm of my own breath. And there, with my hands resting on the railing and my bare feet on the cool tile floor, I knew I had won. Not because I had taken everything back, but because I had given back to myself what should never have been lost. Time, worth, and space to live. The next morning, I went to a stationery shop near home. I had a line printed on thick paper, framed simply, "Here lives a woman who no longer has to apologize for existing." I hung it right by the door, so anyone who walked in, even just me, could read and remember. Because for so many years, I had only been a functional presence in other people's lives. This story is fictional but inspired by real experiences. Names and locations have been changed to protect privacy. Andrea, the mother who spent her life sacrificing, only to one day realize she was no longer seen, is the image of so many of us. When love is traded for silence, when kindness is treated as obligation, we must ask ourselves, is silence still compassion? Or is it just the way we disappear inside our own homes? Andrea chose to speak not with anger, but by reclaiming peace for her soul. And perhaps, in that quiet, God restored to her the meaning of freedom. May everyone who is hurting find their own light. Please watch the 2 stories showing on the screen. Perhaps one of them will touch your heart today.